Some people feel like we spend too much time talking and hearing opinions and asking questions and things like that, and not enough just doing the business of the community. But I think that's one of the joys and benefits of living in a small town. You can't just show up and solve all the world's problems tomorrow, right? Like, there's a process, there's ways you do things, there's procedures and all that. Whenever we can bring folks in and like celebrate the good stuff with them, like, I just think that's my favorite part.
Welcome to Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. I'm Dave Martin. With me, as always, is my co-host and the past president of the Iowa League of Cities, but the mayor of Dubuque, Brad Cavanagh. Brad?
I'm really far away, Dave.
Well, come on in.
I'm way over here. Oh, now I'm up close. Yeah.
There you go.
Thanks for bringing two mics to the show, Dave.
I do what I can. And our first guest is Anthony Heddlesten. He is the mayor of Riverdale, Iowa. Welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here. Thanks for having me come talk today.
First, we need to explain to folks your city. It is you've had a population burst. You went, as I understand, from 379 to 550. Why are people scrambling to move into Riverdale?
Well, we are home of one of the best school districts in the state of Iowa. Pleasant Valley School District is headquartered, and the high school is within our community. We are part of the Quad City metropolitan area, so we're actually fully encased on three sides by Bettendorf, Iowa, and we have the Mississippi River and then East Moline, Illinois to the south of us. We had one remaining open property in the city, which was a Century Farm. The children were given the farm after their parents passed away, and they decided that they didn't want to keep driving the tractors in and out from several miles away, so they sold it to a developer, and it has been, updating. So we went from 167 housing units in our whole community to 117 new ones being constructed in this particular development, which is a pretty huge change for us. Also, the houses that are going up are on average probably 1.5 to 3 times the price of anything else in our community. So they're really, really huge. Sometimes even multi-generational homes where you've got like grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and then grandkids that live all together. So it's a pretty different type of neighborhood from the ones we've had up till this point. So,
well, Brad, you must have some thoughts about having a city that's surrounded by other cities.
Yeah, I'm just really curious about this. So I grew up, in eastern Iowa. I mean, I grew up mostly in Dubuque and a little bit south of there, but always went to the Quad Cities. Spent a lot of time in, Davenport and Bettendorf and Moline and Rock Island. I always thought there were 4 cities there. So is Riverdale the only one that's like this, that's nestled in this way?
So, first of all, as a Quad City historian that used to live on the other side of the river, I do have to say the real 4 Quad Cities are Davenport, Rock Island, Moline, and East Moline, because when it picked up that moniker, Bettendorf was not that big of a community yet, and all the industry from John Deere was on the other side of the river, and so the bigger cities were there. They did try pitching the Quint cities for a while. It didn't really take, and so for whatever reason, there's a lot of older businesses that are called Tri-Cities. Then there's a lot of Quad City stuff, and then just for whatever, we just got stuck in our ways. If you go to like our Visitor Bureau website, you'll actually realize that there are 58 cities that make up the Quad City metro area. But our unique situation where we're fully engulfed inside of Bettendorf, there's actually 2 of us. So my community, which is again around 550 people, there's another even smaller community called Panorama Park, which is literally just their main street, Park Avenue, and 2 cross streets. And they're about 100 people. They don't have any commercial businesses. They don't have any industry. They are literally just like a housing subdivision that didn't want to be Bettendorf.
Wow, that is just fascinating Iowa history right there.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And we all had to go to the Supreme Court of the Iowa Supreme Court to get to the place that we are today. So we founded ourselves in 1950. This is actually our 75th anniversary as a community. It took 3 years until February 12th, 1953, before the Supreme Court ruled, which we like to call our Independence Day too. So we've got like a day where we were founded, and then like an Independence Day too, where the Supreme Court ruled in our favor. So
this is a question for both of you, and whoever wants to jump in first can. I know that a lot of places in Iowa are fast growing. How do you manage growth like that, in a very small city and in a large city in Iowa? How do you manage that and have it retain the sort of flavor and feel that you want it to?
So I think one of the interesting challenges we faced when the development started to happen was, first, there was a large outcry from the residents about how it was funded. The neighborhood was developed using a residential TIF, which was very controversial at the time. Now that we're 8 years into it, because it started, the previous council and mayor before I started were the ones that had enacted this new neighborhood and signed on all the paperwork for it. There was a lot of concern about that from the school district, from the county. Now that the money's starting to come in, we've actually been able to use that money. We created a program called Reinvest in Riverdale, and we're taking those TIF dollars, which have to be used for low to moderate income housing, and we're finding people. A lot of them are senior citizens. We do have some lower income residents too, and we're able to help them with updating mechanicals, putting new roofs on their houses, cutting down trees that were putting risk to their house, things like that, and also some of the businesses that help different people in the community. So what started off as a largely kind of negatively viewed thing, even though it was in our comprehensive plan, we knew this field was going to turn into houses at some point. It's really turned into a huge positive for residents, not just in that neighborhood, but all across the community. Obviously still some concerns with the tax growth and stuff, and not being able to access all that with the TIF. But we also, one of the unique things about our community is if you drive down Highway 67, you'll start in Bettendorf, you'll all of a sudden end up in Riverdale, and then if you keep driving, you'll end up in Bettendorf again. But each of the neighborhoods that make up our community are effectively a dead-end neighborhood off of Highway 67. So none of the neighborhoods were interconnected, and that kind of helps build that small town feel, even though we're in the middle of a big metro area. And so the initial plans for this neighborhood were to have multiple connections, roadway connections from it to our existing neighborhood, and that was probably maybe the biggest controversy of it originally. And so the new International Building Code requires any development over 30 units has to have multiple exits, which is a great safety feature, right? Our neighborhoods right now, we don't have that. And so we actually saw the negative aspect of that when we had a water main break on one of our hills going up the bluff from the Mississippi River, and we didn't have a way for people to get in and out as we had to do a full depth tear out and replacement of a road. We had to build an emergency access route through somebody's yard onto another street in another neighborhood, which was a real challenge. And so,
yeah, a real challenge in someone's backyard. I can see how that would be. So, Mayor Cavanagh, what do you have? What advice do you have for a young mayor in a fast-growing city, and how you handle it in your city?
Well, I don't know about advice. I mean, it's very similar. I think a lot of the challenges that you have are all really similar, despite whatever size you really are. I think that the growing pains of the unknown, I think, are one of the biggest things that we experience. This idea of, well, if you bring this housing here, then this and this are going to happen. Or if you bring this commercial space here, then all these different things are going to happen. And a lot of those things probably aren't going to happen, but they're real fears and you have to hear them out. I think part of, and it sounds like this is what Anthony's already talking about, is you really have to get community buy-in as you go when you're going to do these things. So when you see this growth happening and you see all these good things that are real progress for a city, then you still have to make sure that everybody is checked in and on the same ride together. Otherwise, people are really feeling left behind or sidelined, and that's when you get the complaints that you're not listening to people and those types of things, which are legitimate concerns that we always have to keep in mind. So I think it's making sure that as you do this planning, that it's community level planning and it's not just the leaders that are in the room. You actually have to have some sort of community input and feedback, and sometimes more than others, depending on what the project or things like that are.
You're nodding your head as if you've been down that road yourself, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. We it doesn't matter what project it is in our community. That is one thing. And I think especially whether perceived or real, a lot of people, when I was elected in, were of that opinion that we were not properly consulted. We did not have our voices heard in this decision for the new neighborhood. And even though, again, now it's largely a positive thing, it's bringing new tax dollars to the community, it's diversifying our tax base, it's bringing new kids to our schools. There's a lot of good things. We have an emergency access route out of our neighborhood now because we used a special access path in the park that's very much not a road, but it has the ability to act as one in an emergency situation. But it helped us get through the challenges, but we had to sit down and have some extra conversations. And so we even had a full design for this, connector path in between the two neighborhoods. And then we had an open house for it, and everybody came in and said, "Oh, no, it looks too much like a road. We got to take a step back." And we unroaded it a little bit and made it look a little bit more. So there's gravel that can carry a fire truck and emergency vehicles and all that stuff. but it also is able to have stuff grow over the top of it now, and it starts to look a little bit more like it's just part of the park instead of this what could be a thoroughfare between neighborhoods. And so sometimes some people feel like we spend too much time talking and hearing opinions and asking questions and things like that, and not enough just doing the business of the community. But I think that's one of the joys and benefits of living in a small town, is that you get to have more of those one-on-one conversations with your neighbors, and you get to that people make you feel like they're part of the conversation.
Right. But that really is what good government is, right? I mean, this idea of bringing people along and making sure that everybody's voice is heard, as many people as possible, at least. Yeah. And I think it is a frustration that people have. It's why people talk about how slow government moves and we're not getting to yes fast enough and things like that. But really what it is you're spending the time listening to enough people that the community can make this decision together, and it's not just a decision that is forced upon people to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's amazing how fast, even in a small town, the dynamics of the community changed. The opinions and the decisions that were made 4 years ago before this neighborhood was fully constructed, and the opinions and decisions that we're making now when we've, one of the things that I've done as mayor is I've made sure that all of our boards and commissions have at least one resident from that new neighborhood. We've got a city council person now from that new neighborhood. And so getting those new voices at the table, we're starting to hear, and there's a little bit of, the people that have been here for 50 years and the people that have been here for 5 months, have some different opinions about how things should go. But, a lot of times just getting them to sit down in a room together and hear each other out. One of the most unique things about our community is, I hope I can say this, I think one of the league's legislative pushes this year is going to be to work on sidewalk regulations, right? We don't have sidewalks. Our community has never put in, there's literally one house which has a sidewalk. It was the very first house that was ever built, and then they stopped. And so every night on my street, it's called Circle Drive, and it's a big circle, people just walk in the street with their dogs and their kids. And one of the most interesting, powerful statements that was made to me was my son went to visit a friend in Bettendorf, which is, again, just across the street kind of thing. And his mom was terrified because he ran out into the street, because he just doesn't even think about it in our community, because our neighborhoods are all built for people and for walking and for dogs and kids, and they're like an extension of your house, right? And there just happen to be cars that slowly zigzag between the people every once in a while. Yeah. And in her neighborhood, and shame on my kid for running out in the street. He shouldn't have been doing that anyway. He does. We do talk about that. Don't worry.
Good.
But he's become so comfortable with it. Like the two of them. I have two sons, and the two of them, they both we're out selling Cub Scout popcorn this week. And again, they just they would just push the wagon right down the middle of the street, and again, we keep trying to stay a little further to the left or stay a little further to the right, and generally try to keep them in. But
all right, that Dad of the Year award's coming next year, I think.
Yeah, no.
All right.
So.
I want to pick up on something else you said. You said new voices, and in many ways, you sort of are a new voice. We talked a little bit before, and you started your career in politics and government at 32. What on earth made you get into it, and what keeps you in it? Because as I've heard from most of the mayors I was just in a meeting with, I know you're all in it for the money.
Yes.
Wow, two mayors burst out laughing at the same time. I'm doing something right.
Mayor is sort of 24/7, right? And so I think a couple of years ago I got a raise from 50 cents an hour to 60 cents an hour or something like that. If you
real money. Yeah.
If you divide it out over the whole time. So yeah, we're a step above volunteers, right? But I grew up on a farm, so don't really have any exciting history with cities or whatever, but I did. I'm a civil engineer by trade, and I work with a lot of communities in my other job working for the federal government. I took a few urban planning classes in college as sort of my depth and breadth of what I needed to learn for civil engineering. And I moved to a wonderful little downtown neighborhood in Rock Island when I first bought a house after graduating college, and there was an opportunity to help out with a neighborhood garden. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. Like, I like doing that sort of stuff. And I did some neighborhood garden activities, and then I got on the neighborhood board, and then I became the neighborhood president, and then our city council person was leaving to move pretty close to where I live now. He said, you ought to run for my seat on city council. I ran in 2013 even, so then I was in my 20s then, and did not win in Rock Island, but then ended up moving across the river, and this whole new neighborhood thing was going on. And I said, I've been engaged in government for quite a while, like small neighborhood politics kind of thing, running for city council. I said, I'll throw my name in the hat. And so actually, I was elected to city council when I was 32. I'd only lived in the town for like 8 months, which was pretty wild to think that, like, again, a community with like a lot of deep ties to families.
Some carpetbaggers moving into our town. And,
and
take it over.
And it was interesting. I mentioned about the sidewalk. So one of the first things I said was, so the regional high school, it's for 4 different communities, is in our city. And I had, as I was knocking on doors when I was going to meet people for the first time, I noticed there was one group of neighbors that lived right next to high school that they had these, the goat paths worn down into their yards from all the kids leaving school. And I brought up, I said, well, don't you think we ought to put in like some sidewalks or streetlights or something so that the kids feel a little, and then you guys aren't having you couldn't offend anyone anymore in our community than to bring that up. And so, but that was a really good lesson for me as a new elected official too, about it's really important to listen to people, right? And so I have ideas of what I think is best and what I think is the right answer, but sometimes you have to balance that with the needs of the people that live in your community and the constituency. And so that was one of those, I got a few earfuls after that one. And, but then I also knew who to ask next time too, and who to get good advice from and things like that. So,
well, Brad, you're smiling. So are you encouraged to hear from a younger mayor?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's really exciting, actually, when people get involved in this way. And, some of the stories are similar, but there's always this uniqueness to it, is why somebody gets into this and why somebody wants to do it. I'm curious about another piece of this, though, because you're on the board for the Iowa League of Cities. Mm-hmm. So you were elected to that. Was how many years? This is your first year. Yeah. So you're getting involved more on a statewide level.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your perspective with that? Some new things you're learning and ways that's been an enjoyable addition to what you're already doing as mayor, making the big bucks?
Yeah. So I mean, super honored to be elected to the Iowa League of Cities board this year. So when I started as mayor, we got the email or call or whatever it was, and they said, hey, do you know about Municipal Leadership Academy? And I was like, oh, great, we'll go check that out, right? Sounds like a good thing. And I've told all of our new council members and other folks that have been elected since I started, I said, I don't know how I could do this job without having had some of that training. And so, I'm professional engineer, licensed. I'm a licensed certified floodplain manager, right? So licensure and certification is really important to me in my professional life. And so I went through the whole thing. I got my certified elected municipal official flag here on my badge today for the conference. But I think one of the things, coming to the Iowa League of Cities events has really opened my eyes to just, all the complicated nuance there is to Iowa's laws and regulations. And again, we talked about, you can't just show up and solve all the world's problems tomorrow, right? There's a process, there's ways you do things, there's procedures and all that. But I think the other part that I really enjoyed with this, and it's actually gotten me doing some other stuff kind of in our local area too, it's nice to, as a small community that doesn't always get heard the same way that a Davenport or a Bettendorf or a Dubuque is going to get heard, right? If you called the governor today, the governor would call you right back. I don't know that
does that happen to you? Are your calls responded?
I don't know if it'd be an immediate callback.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, but I'm I get it. There's 900 plus communities, right? They got to prioritize things every day. And so I think being able to have my small community's voice heard on a bigger stage sometimes, or even just the fact that I think the League of Cities does a really great job of making sure that there are communities of a wide breadth of sizes throughout that represent Iowa properly, right? So one of the things that, we were just looking for new board members here recently, and, we wanted to make sure all corners of the state were covered. We wanted to make sure that all the different sizes of communities were covered, and trying to get that diversity of communities represented. And so being able to there's a lot of 400 person to 500 person communities in Iowa, but there's probably not a lot of 400 to 500 person communities that are inside of a giant metro area and have a giant aluminum factory and a college and a high school in them. Like, we're a really unique, different community compared to some of the other small communities. And so sometimes like that gives us extra challenges because we have different big city problems that we deal with, and sometimes that also gives us some really great benefits, like having Arconic in our backyard that is a big taxpayer allows us to do a few more things that other 300 person towns, 400 person towns don't get to do. So but yeah, I think being on the league board and being able to get that kind of share our perspective with others and be at the table to help make some of those decisions that affect the communities across Iowa, I think is really important.
I don't know what you heard, but I just heard an excellent speech, a kickoff speech for president of the Iowa League of Cities. Yes, that's what I heard.
I did kind of hear that.
Yes. I think.
I think you already picked a new one already.
There's a future.
There's a term waiting for you in the years ahead, Anthony. So yes.
So we have a few questions. We're going to get to the heart of your Iowa-ness.
Okay.
Our first question is, what makes Riverdale a real Iowa city?
Ooh, well, if you're not familiar, Riverdale is the home of Archie.
It's Riverdale in the Bronx.
Oh, no, it's Riverdale, Iowa. It says it in there.
Uh-huh.
So, but no, that's always like we do get a lot of people that ask us questions about Archie, right? I think although it just recently left, I think it was really neat that we still had a Century Farm until 2018, right? So to say that, here we are, this community that's only 75 years old, so we're in one of the newer communities in Iowa, but to think that we had a Century Farm for all those years, I think that's a really neat thing. The other thing, the heritage of our community. So before Arconic was there, which Arconic is an Iowa institution at this point now too. It also celebrated its 75th anniversary last year. We were the Iowana Dairy before that, and so it was which you may not have heard of it now these days, but it was a national landmark. It was one of the best dairy producing places all across the country, and sadly not there anymore. But most of our community is built on Colonel French's farm, and even one of his two mansions still stands. The other mansion where it was an over a 10,000 square foot mansion, is now one of our parks. And then we still also have one of his servants' homes that was up there too, that for his different farmhands and stuff that work there. So there's a lot of neat, I just think there's a lot of neat Iowa history there with the dairy industry and then the Century Farm. And
so good government can be hard to deliver. So what's been a pleasant surprise about running your city?
So this year was our 75th anniversary, and one of the things that I found as I was trying, I wanted to do some I love doing celebrations. I love doing proclamations and celebrations. That's one of my favorite things to do. And my goal is by the end of this year and the end of my fourth term, I will have issued 75 proclamations celebrating people and things in our community.
That's a great idea.
For our 75th anniversary, right? So, and not all 75 are this year, but I've done the history of how Father Marquette came and found our community for the very first time back in 1673, to all the different counties that it transferred to over the years and stuff like that. But for our 75th anniversary, we had these meticulous records that were kept of all of the people who were elected officials, served on boards and commissions, were city staff. And so I like doing genealogy. I was sharing earlier with you guys before we started recording. I'm actually descendant of 4 or 5 different mayors, two of them, Winterset and Tipton. But we were able to reach out to the families of almost every single of the 300 plus people that have ever served in a formal role in our community, and we invite them all to a dinner.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it was, and each of them got a service pin with our little logo and a number for how many years of service they'd served the community this summer. And the best moment of the whole thing was this lady came up to me. She was getting a pin for her grandfather, his name was Clyde Shank, and he was the longest serving Iowa politician, and maybe the entire country's longest serving politician, until I think he was beat by Chuck Grassley. He'd served 41 years since the founding of the town.
Wow.
Until he decided to retire, and he was mayor pro tem, councilman the entire time. And she was like, I didn't even know you guys remembered my grandfather and this. And then we found out her husband was on the fire department. and like I don't think he knew all the right, and so it was just neat making that connection. So but like those kind of things, whenever we can bring folks in and like celebrate the good stuff with them, like I just think that's my favorite part for sure.
Tell me about a good government project that you're really excited about other than the 75th anniversary. And by the way, your pin only has 5. Let's work on that, shall we?
Oh yeah, well I know. We do them in 5-year increments.
Okay,
so
all right.
I got if
so you got 4 more years to go.
If I get reelected, I will have my 10-year pin at the end of my tenure here.
What's a good government project you're excited about?
So, I mean, the biggest thing that we wanted to do because again, we had a big turnover of new elected officials when I started. The biggest thing was building that communications with folks. So, we held some town halls. We tried to sit down more frequently with people and just make sure their voices were heard. The first 4 years when I was on council, we did a lot of studying. So, the community had not really sat down and looked at itself. I think like kind of had like an introspective look at itself in some number of years, and so we were able to cut taxes 20%. We ended up with like a $2 million surplus, which for us is like 4 years worth of budget, which is like way more than you probably should be holding.
That's impressive.
In the back. Yeah, right. And so not that we just went and burned through it all or anything, but we tried to kind of like, okay, how do we bring this tax rate down a little bit to get it to the right place? Try to understand what are the constant needs that we have versus what are those extra things, big projects, things like that. We've been able to, replace a couple of roads and parking lots and things that needed to be replaced. So again, civil engineer here, probably not exciting to anybody else. For me, one of the biggest projects that we've been able to do, in 2019, we had a major flood, the biggest flood on record in the Mississippi River. And we are on a regional sewer network with the city of Davenport. We got a phone call. If we don't start pumping raw sewage into the Mississippi River right now, we are going to lose pipes in the sewer network because it is overpressurized and things are going to start collapsing. And so we had to do that in people's backyards. And if you can imagine what that sounds like and smells like in the middle of the night with a giant pump running outside your backyard, not good. EPA gave us a consent decree after that. You give us $80 million or you do $80 million in repairs, region, not just to us, but the whole region. And so inflow and infiltration was one of the biggest problems we had. We have tested and replaced or repaired every single sewer in our entire community. So we have, for at least a brief moment, fully eliminated inflow and infiltration, which again, as a civil engineer, is a pretty wild thing to be able to say that we've done.
That's a big deal as a city.
It's a big deal as a city. And again, it's like nobody sees it. There's nothing, but in 2023, we had another flood that was in the top 10 records, and it all worked. There was 26 million gallons per day less flowing into the Davenport wastewater facility because of all the work that all 4 cities had done. So us and Panorama Park, because we're much smaller and have a much smaller sewer network, we did joint projects together. We have completely eliminated I&I in both of our communities.
Wow, that's a good government project.
I mean, that's
for sure.
To me, like I guess that's a huge one for me.
All right, so this last question that we have for you puts you right on the spot. Okay. So you got to answer it. What is your favorite place in Riverdale?
Oh, I mean, it's got to be the Duck Creek Pancake House. So
you got Dave's attention.
The Duck Creek Pancake House.
Yeah. So when I was talking about that pumping there, right? Like, so Duck Creek is the major urban stream that flows through the Quad Cities on the Iowa side. Its end point, its confluence with the Mississippi River, is in Riverdale. Riverdale's on one side, Bettendorf's on the other side of the creek. And right at the corner there is of the main highway, US 67 and Duck Creek, is the Duck Creek Pancake House. And that's a lot of times where I have town hall meetings for people to come down and meet with me. We have a group of small town mayors that get together in Scott County this month. That's where we're having our small town mayors meeting with our local legislators and stuff. I went in there the other morning to make my reservation for that, and there was one of our former mayors that I got to sit down and chit chat with her. She's in her 80s now, and she's always happy to give me pointers and stuff. But she was our first female mayor too back in the day. So, but it's a great place. Like, it's everybody's always there, right? It's our only restaurant. So,
and do you have a standing order at the Duck Creek Pancake House?
I mean, I usually get like biscuits and gravy because that's kind of my thing.
Yes.
So, whenever I can get biscuits and gravy, gravy. The other
Yep.
thing, I'm a big fan of their the hollandaise sauce. If you get like I can't even think of what that's called right now.
Eggs Benedict.
Eggs Benedict. There we go. Yeah. So, gosh, So,
All right, then. Anthony Heddlesten, you are the mayor of Riverdale and the future president of the National League of Cities, now that you've given your campaign speech. Well, thank you for joining us.
thank you so much for having me. And for those of you looking to vote in the future on that that National League of Cities presidency, I'll look forward to your
Yes, your
speaking with you in the future.
your support for that. So, Mayor Cavanagh, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here, Dave, as always.
Now that you've listened to Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities, make sure you listen to The Good Government Show, another show from Valley Park Productions. On The Good Government Show, I talk with mayors, commissioners, and leaders from across government about what works. We talk about what government means and how we can get the best out of government. So join me right here where you're listening now to The Good Government Show. That's our show. Thanks for listening. Join us again right here for the next episode of Leading Iowa, Good Government in Iowa Cities. Make sure you like us and share us with your friends. Follow us on Facebook. Leading Iowa is a Valley Park production in association with the Iowa League of Cities. The show is executive produced by Katie Wheeler and Brad Cavanagh for the Iowa League of Cities. Jim Ludlow, Dave Martin, that's me, and David Snyder are executive producers for Valley Park Productions. Our show is edited and produced by Jason Stershic.